He wore a dirty hoodie, asked to withdraw $72,000, 0 cents. They laughed, called security, called the cops. 10 minutes later, he fired the manager. Because the man they humiliated, he was the CEO. Jamal Washington was born on the floor of a 2-room apartment in Southside Chicago during a blackout. His mother, Denise, wrapped him in an old motel towel, whispered a prayer, and got up the next morning to mop off his floors before sunrise. His father, Leonard, worked construction until a herniated disc ended his career at 42. Life wasn't just hard, it was relentless. They didn't have air conditioning in the summer. They didn't have heat in the winter. But what they had was fire in their spirit, and that fire was passed down to Jamal. At age 8, he would sit by the door of the local bank while his mother begged a teller to waive the overdraft fee. The woman behind the glass never smiled. She chewed gum and said, "Ma'am, rules are rules." Jamal remembered staring at the marble floors, thinking they were colder than the Chicago wind outside. One day, his mom left the bank in tears and said, "Baby, never let anyone treat you like you don't matter, not even if you're broke." That sentence would stay with him longer than any classroom lesson ever would. By 12, Jamal was selling candy bars outside train stations. By 14, he was tutoring classmates twice his age. By 16, he walked into that same bank to open a savings account, and the clerk literally laughed when she saw his torn hoodie and Southside zip code on the form. "Are you sure this is the right place?" she asked, smirking. That was the moment he learned what it felt like to be measured by the weight of your clothes, not the content of your character. But Jamal didn't quit. He leveled up. He studied by candlelight during power outages, used gas station Wi-Fi to submit college applications, and worked overnight shifts stocking groceries while studying macroeconomics on his phone. He got into Howard University with a partial scholarship and paid the rest by mopping dorm halls before class. At Howard, he met people who talked differently, dressed differently, expected more from the world. And slowly, he began to expect more from himself. He graduated top 3 in his class, earned an MBA from Columbia, and was headhunted by the biggest investment firm in the Northeast. But instead of chasing Wall Street status, Jamal had another plan: build the kind of bank his parents never had. And he did. By 36, he helped launch Liberty First Bank, a financial institution dedicated to working-class Americans, teachers, truckers, janitors, gig workers, single moms. No hidden fees, no judgment, no velvet rope policies. He started with 3 branches in underserved communities. In less than a decade, Liberty First grew to over 600 branches nationwide, with Jamal as its CEO. Forbes called him the quiet storm of finance. But Jamal didn't care about headlines. He cared about legacies. And that legacy was being threatened. Over the past year, complaints started rolling in. First, a few messages on LinkedIn, then hundreds of emails, then handwritten letters from elderly customers. Stories of people being ignored at counters. A dishwasher denied an account because he didn't look like he'd keep a balance. A veteran turned away for not having a smartphone to access online services. A woman sobbing in the parking lot after being told to learn how technology works. At first, Jamal thought it might be isolated. But the more he read, the more one branch kept appearing. Liberty First, Matlanta Central. He pulled up internal reports. Metrics were clean. Revenue was strong. Customer surveys? Filtered by management. But Jamal had learned long ago, numbers lie when people hide behind them. So instead of sending an executive assistant, he dug through his closet, found his old gray hoodie, slipped on his worn Nikes, and packed the same frayed backpack he once carried as a student. He told no one. No security detail, no PR team, no warning. Just Jamal, a boarding pass, and the truth waiting on the other side. When he landed in Atlanta, the cab driver asked what brought him to town. Jamal smiled and said, "Accountability." The driver nodded, unaware that the man in the back seat was worth millions and had the power to end careers with a single call. But Jamal wasn't here to fire anyone. Yet, he was here to listen, to observe, to feel, again, what it's like to be invisible. And more than anything else, he wanted to know. If my mother walked into that branch today dressed the same way she did 20 years ago, would they treat her like a customer or like a problem? That was the real test. Because Liberty First claimed to serve the people. But claims meant nothing without proof. And today, Jamal Washington wasn't showing up as a CEO. He was walking in as a black man in a hoodie with $72,000 0 cents in his account and a lifetime of memories about what disrespect smells like. Jamal stepped through the glass doors of Liberty First, Atlanta Central Branch at exactly 9:56. IMing, the air conditioning hit him like a slap. Cold, sterile, indifferent. Just like the stairs. The teller didn't look up. The security guard gave him a once-over, then a second glance, narrowing his eyes like he was scanning for weapons, not a wallet. No one said good morning. No one even nodded. Jamal pulled a ticket from the kiosk and sat quietly. From his seat, he could see everything. The customers, the employees, the way voices dropped or rose depending on who was standing at the counter. An elderly black man in a Vietnam veteran cap shuffled to the window, holding a flip phone, struggling to explain he couldn't access his balance online. "You have to do it through the app," the teller snapped. "I've already told you 3 times." Jamal clenched his jaw. A Hispanic woman in a faded work uniform waited with an envelope full of bills. Her number had already been skipped. Twice. Still, she waited. Jamal had seen enough in 20 minutes to know the complaints weren't exaggerated. If anything, they'd been toned down. Then came his turn. His number popped on the screen. He stood up, walked to the counter, and was met by Chelsea, the same teller who rolled her eyes at the veteran. She didn't smile, just looked at him flatly and said, "ID and account number?" Jamal handed over his driver's license and bank card. She typed, paused, looked again. "You're trying to withdraw, how much?" $72,000. Chelsea blinked, then laughed. "Excuse me? You heard me. This doesn't make sense. I'm gonna need a manager." She didn't ask. She didn't question. She just assumed. Within minutes, a tall man in an overpriced suit came striding out from the back, cologne trailing him like a warning sign. Derek Coleman, branch manager. He stopped short when he saw Jamal. Didn't offer a handshake, just said, "What's the issue here?" Chelsea replied quickly, "He's trying to pull 72 grand from this account, but look at him." Derek squinted. "Is this some kind of prank?" Jamal stood tall. "I'd like to make a withdrawal from my own account, that's all." Derek snorted. "Let's not waste time. This account isn't yours. People like you don't walk around with this kind of balance. So unless you tell me whose account this really is, we're gonna have a problem." Jamal's silence said more than any insult ever could. But Derek wasn't done. He turned to security. "Keep an eye on him." Then back to Chelsea. "Call the police." The word echoed louder than the HVAC. "Sir, I think—" Chelsea started. "I said call the police. This smells like fraud." A woman in the line gasped. A teenager pulled out his phone to record. Jamal didn't blink. Instead, he slowly sat down in the nearest chair and pulled out his phone. One text, one word. "Now." 3 minutes later, 2 Atlanta PD officers walked through the glass doors. Derek greeted them like old friends. "It's this guy. Suspicious account activity. Claims this is his account. Says he wants to withdraw $72,000, 0 cents cash, no business attire, no security, no prior appointment. You tell me." The older officer raised an eyebrow. The younger one looked confused. "Sir," the officer said gently, "do you have documentation for the account?" Jamal handed it over without a word. "License, card, backup passport copy, all valid." Chelsea whispered, "Everything matches, but that can't be his balance. It just doesn't add up." Derek cut her off. "You've seen the footage, right? These guys are trained. Fake names, real cards, spoofed IDs, happens all the time." The officer turned back to Jamal. "Sir, would you be willing to come with us just to clear this up?" Jamal nodded. "Of course, but before I do..." He stood, pulled his phone from his pocket and tapped the screen. A digital badge appeared. Jamal Washington, Chief Executive Officer, Liberty First National. Silence. No movement. No breathing. Just stillness. The color drained from Derek's face. Chelsea took a step back. The security guard looked like he might throw up. Jamal looked Derek in the eyes. "You said people like me don't have this kind of money. I built this system. I created the very account protocols you just weaponized against me." Derek tried to speak. Couldn't. The younger cop turned to his partner. "That's real," he whispered. Jamal continued, "I came here today because I received over 30 letters about how this branch treats its customers. I didn't want to believe them, but now I've seen it for myself." He tapped again. The screen behind the teller lit up. A video call. HR director, legal counsel, board member. "Mr. Coleman," the HR rep said firmly, "you are hereby terminated for misconduct and violation of company ethics. Effective immediately. Hand over your badge and exit the premises." Chelsea gasped. "And, Ms. Pierce," the HR rep added, "you're on immediate suspension pending internal review." Jamal said nothing more. He turned, walked toward the woman still holding her envelope. "Ma'am," he said gently, "you're next. And if anyone here treats you with anything less than full respect, you let me know." She nodded, eyes wide with tears. Behind him, Derek was still frozen. Jamal didn't look back. As Derek stood frozen, still processing the weight of his mistake, the room began to shift. The whispers from the customers turned into silence, not out of fear, but out of shock. For the past 45 minutes, they had been watching what they thought was just another poor man getting humiliated for asking too much. Now, that same man had just fired the boss, in front of everyone. One of the customers, a woman in scrubs, clearly on break from her nursing shift, whispered to no one in particular, "That's the CEO? That's Liberty First's CEO?" Another man, a delivery driver still holding his lunch receipt, nodded slowly. "I've never seen anything like this," he muttered. Jamal didn't revel in the silence. He broke it. "Let's be very clear," he said, his voice calm, deep, unshaken. "This was never just about me. This is about what happens in places like this every single day to people who look like me, to people who speak with an accent, to people who don't wear a Rolex." He turned to face the cameras now recording from multiple phones. He welcomed it. "For years, I've received letters from customers saying they were treated like burdens, like frauds, like they didn't belong in their own bank. And honestly, I thought maybe they were exaggerating. Maybe they just caught someone on a bad day. But today, I saw it. I felt it, and I lived it." Chelsea remained behind the counter, pale, visibly shaken. The security guard who'd been watching Jamal with suspicion now avoided eye contact entirely. Then came the message that no one expected. Jamal raised his phone again and read a statement aloud from the company's ethics board. "Effective immediately, a full audit will be launched across all Liberty First branches. Hidden surveillance footage, customer service audio, internal communications. Everything will be reviewed. And this time, we're not looking for profits. We're looking for humanity." The room was dead quiet. Jamal looked back at Derek. The man looked 10 years older than he did just 20 minutes earlier. "You didn't fail because you made a mistake," Jamal said, slow and intentional. "You failed because you made that mistake with certainty. You were sure I was lying. You were sure I was a scam. You were sure I wasn't supposed to be here. And that certainty, that's the most dangerous thing in leadership." He turned to Chelsea. "You didn't laugh because the numbers were funny. You laughed because of how I looked when I said them. And that kind of laughter doesn't come from policy, it comes from prejudice." Chelsea's eyes welled. She didn't try to defend herself. She knew. Then, one of the customers, the same elderly man who'd been yelled at earlier, stepped forward with his flip phone still in hand. "Mr. Washington," he said quietly, "I just want to thank you. Folks like us, we get treated like ghosts, like we're already gone. But today, you showed up for us." Jamal placed a hand on the man's shoulder and simply nodded. "That's why I came." Then he addressed the entire room. "This branch is not being shut down, but it will be rebuilt. Not with bricks, with people, with principles. Everyone here will be retrained, every leader reevaluated, and if you can't treat people with basic decency, you will not wear our badge." Behind him, the large screen that had shown the HR meeting now displayed a new slide, white letters on a black background. "Respect isn't earned by appearance, it's earned by action." The security guard slowly removed his earpiece and placed it on the desk. "I'd like to start that training," he said quietly. Jamal nodded. "Then You're already ahead of most. Jamal stood quietly for a moment, letting the room breathe. The kind of silence that follows a storm. Not the silence of fear, but of realization. Then he turned back to the woman who had been standing silently in the line this whole time. The one with the envelope full of cash, still clutched tightly in her hands like it was her entire life savings. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I believe you were waiting long before I was." She blinked, startled. "Yes, sir, I was." "Then please," he said, extending his arm, "step forward. You're next." He didn't say it to be poetic. He said it like a promise. As she passed him, she whispered, "Thank you for standing up for people like us." He gave her a gentle nod but said nothing, because sometimes silence says more than a speech. The rest of the customers looked different now. Not because they'd changed clothes or positions, but because their perspectives had shifted. What began as a spectacle had turned into a mirror. Some looked ashamed, some looked inspired. All looked like they had just witnessed something they weren't ready to forget. Jamal walked over to the elderly man who had thanked him earlier, the same man who had been brushed aside for not knowing how to use the bank app. "Sir," Jamal asked, "what's your name?" "It's Harold," he replied. "Well, Mr. Harold," Jamal said, "if you ever have a problem again, here's my direct number. No call centers, no hold music, just me." Harold held the paper like it was gold. "I ain't never had a CO talk to me like that," he said, eyes misty. "Hell, I ain't never had one look me in the eye." Then Jamal did something no one expected. He walked back to the counter where Chelsea still stood, frozen, and placed a small folded note on the counter. "That's a reading list," he said. "Books on equity, leadership, compassion. If you're serious about changing, start there." She nodded silently, lower lip trembling, too ashamed to speak. But that moment wasn't about punishment. It was about responsibility. Next, Jamal took a few slow steps toward the center of the branch. The screen behind him still showed the phrase, "Respect isn't earned by appearance. It's earned by action." He looked up at it and let the silence settle once more. Then, turning to face everyone in the room, staff, customers, even the two officers still standing by the entrance, he said, "My mother spent most of her life being treated like she was in the way. She cleaned floors in places fancier than this and no one ever learned her name. But I remember every insult she swallowed so I could stand here today. This moment, this building, this badge I wear, it's all because she refused to quit. So, when I say this branch will change, I don't mean for the sake of policy. I mean for the sake of every person who ever left a bank feeling smaller than when they walked in." He paused. "And if you're ever tempted to judge someone by what they wear, or where they're from, or how much money you think they have, remember what happened today. Because I'll be back, and next time, I might not be wearing this badge. But I'll still be watching." A woman in the crowd started clapping, then another, then the entire branch echoed with slow, rising applause, not because they were told to, but because they couldn't help it. It wasn't the kind of applause reserved for celebrities. It was the applause of relief, of recognition, of people realizing that someone finally saw them. On his way out, Jamal stopped by Harl again. "Tell your grandkids," he said with a smile. "You met a CEO who still remembers what it feels like to be ignored." Harold chuckled. "I'm telling the whole neighborhood." And with that, Jamal pushed the glass doors open, stepped out into the Georgia sun, and disappeared down the sidewalk, hoodie still on, sneakers still scuffed, heart still full. That day, the story spread like wildfire, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. Footage from inside the branch went viral within hours. Millions watched a man in a hoodie dismantle arrogance with grace, disarm prejudice with poise, and restore dignity without ever raising his voice. News anchors called him a hero, executives called him bold. But Jamal Washington? He didn't say much at all. He returned to his office the next morning, poured a cup of coffee, and went back to work. Same hoodie hanging behind the door, same beat-up sneakers under his desk, waiting for the next walk among the invisible. And that's the part people missed. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about a public takedown. It was about remembrance. About what happens when we forget where we came from, who we once were, or how easy it is to become the very system that once shut us out. Because the truth is, Some of the worst injustice doesn't happen in courtrooms or headlines. It happens in the quiet corners of everyday life. At front desks, behind counters, between narrowed eyes and forced smiles. It happens when someone decides who you are before you even open your mouth. But here's what matters most. Jamal didn't just show power, he showed purpose. He reminded us that true leadership doesn't look down, it walks beside. It doesn't dominate, it listens. And it doesn't punish, it transforms. So if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been underestimated because of your clothes, your job, your accent, your skin, your zip code, know this: you are not alone, and more importantly, you are not powerless. Because sometimes, the most ordinary-looking person in the room is the one with the power to change everything. Now it's your turn. If this story moved you, don't just scroll past. Share it. Tag someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment with your own experience. Let the world know respect is not reserved, it's owed. To everyone. Always. And if you ever see someone being dismissed, ignored, or talked down to, don't wait for a CEO to walk in. Be the one who speaks up. Because the truth? The world doesn't change when powerful people act. It changes when regular people stop staying silent.